Hello everyone, another actor collection is complete, one of the absolute biggest, Arnold Schwarzenegger. We have a lot to go through, so let's get started. Hello everyone, I've been doing a lot of collection, completion videos for specific movies and a handful of actors, but now I'm actually getting into some of the much larger collections, franchises that I'm finishing up, and specific actors that I have very large collections for, much larger than some of the ones I've done earlier. And for those videos, I did ask a question in an earlier video whether you'd rather see it by movie or by format, as I was kind of mulling over this question about how to go about some of these much larger collections. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, being the first one of these big ones done, is one of my top 5 biggest actor collections. So I decided to do by format overall. The main reason why, instead of doing by movie, is that for a lot of these actors that I have big collections for, most of them I have at least 1 or 2 big box sets that encompass a bunch of different movies. And if I was going by movie, that same box set would just be coming on screen 5, 6, 7, for a couple of these actors, 10 to 12 times. So I'm going to go by format. I thought that's a little bit more of an efficient way of going about things. I'm going to start with the biggest for Arnold DVD, which is the biggest format for most of the actors. We have both versions of the 25th anniversary edition of Pumping Iron in the 2 different cases, and this is such an extraordinary dramatic documentary. It's part documentary, part dramatization, and it makes for perfect viewing. It's the combination is just spectacular, and this is very early Arnold. Really shows him in a great light. It shows a combination of the real him and a characters of him that he's created, a caricature of who he really is that he created, and really shows a lot of his sense of humor, and is one that is fantastic viewing and is even better when you rewatch it after you read a lot about Arnold and kind of get to know him a little better, as you know, the way his mind works and how his humor works, and I've seen a lot of his movies. Then you really get a lot of these scenes, and a lot of the ones where he's just making up stuff and really playing a character, version of himself. It's great in that sense, and it's also a really fantastic documentary. I have multiple documentaries and many others that I've seen on the topic of bodybuilding, and this is still by far my favorite. It's just done so well, and this was one of the things that propelled Arnold into the limelight and going into movies after being, I still think, one of the greatest bodybuilders ever in the history of the sport. In high school and middle school, high school, and college and things, I was into track and field, and I also got into bodybuilding when I was in my early 20s. One of the few sports I ever was really into and followed, and a lot of that was because of this documentary and because of Arnold. It's just fantastic, and it's so quotable. It's funny, it's endearing, and it's exciting, and it's just a fantastic. If you haven't seen Pumping Iron, you have to see Pumping Iron. It's amazing. Arnold is definitely the guy who brought bodybuilding out of obscurity and then became much more commonplace and in the limelight, and you started getting more things like GNC and those types of supplements, and it really, that whole industry needed a push out of obscurity and into the mainstream, and this was one of the biggest catalysts for that. And so Arnold, definitely, if you want to get more into it, then check out this huge, massive book. I'll put next to the DVD. A good pairing with this is the giant encyclopedia of bodybuilding, the Arnold Schwarzenegger version here. There's a couple different versions of this, but definitely this one, this monster with Arnold, is fantastic. This was something that I absolutely loved, and I wish I had this when I was into bodybuilding, when I was in my 20s, when I was actually doing it, because I would have devoured this. But it's still fascinating and gives you a good look into the sport. So definitely another element of Arnold Schwarzenegger outside of just the movies. Speaking about his early career, we have this is one of Arnold's first movies, where he was actually credited as Arnold Strong, which you can read about in different biographies about him, like why that occurred at first. People can't pronounce Schwarzenegger. No one's going to know what that is. But you have to get a DVD or Blu-ray of this. I don't think there are any VHS copies, and the LaserDisc I know all have the dubbed version, which to me is unwatchable. You have to get one that has The dub and Arnold's original voice track. That's what makes this movie fantastic. Hercules in New York. It's a pretty awful movie overall. It's not very good, but it is cheesy and campy, and to where the point where it can be so bad it's good, that level of entertaining. But what really takes it over the edge is Arnold's original voice track, because he really was not a very good actor yet. He really hadn't quite, found his groove of the action comedy, the great action movie with one-liners. He really hadn't quite found that groove yet, and he also had a thicker accent than ever and was having trouble with English throughout this whole thing. And the whole thing ends up being hilarious. It is one of the greatest So Bad's Good movies of all time. It's fantastic for that viewing, but you have to get it with Arnold's original voice track. Otherwise, it's just not enjoyable. Moving on to True Lies. And The Last Action Hero. Which, The Last Action Hero, I feel like, is it just me, or has this movie had a resurgence in the past, decade? I feel like this was just kind of considered one of the lesser Arnold movies for a long time. Its reviews weren't fantastic from when it came out, but then it seems to be now have become one of the fan favorites over time. I think I've seen that over the years. It just seems to be one that has kind of crawled up the ranks as far as how much people enjoy it. This is not one of Arnold's best movies, but it's one of my Christmas traditions. Jingle All the Way with young Anakin there is hilarious. It is so funny. It's not a great movie, but it is just from start to finish laugh out loud, hilarious and ridiculous and absurd. I love his Hunt for the Turbo Man doll. It's fantastic. It's great. So Jingle All the Way, it's one of those movies that has terrible reviews. I feel like not a lot of people like that movie, but I think it's hilarious from start to finish because of how ridiculous it is. It's absurd, it's goofy, it's cartoony, it's colorful, it's just fun. It's stupid fun. Turn off your brain for an hour and a half and just give in to the goofiness, and it's great. A much better comedy that has rightfully reached kind of legendary status, and it's weird. It's one of those that I've in years past, I remember looking at some older reviews, and it was just kind of considered okay. But over time, who doesn't love Twins? Twins is amazing. Twins is fantastic, and it's so much more than I think a lot of people that haven't seen it think. It's just the joke is just, oh my gosh, Danny DeVito is short and Arnold is tall. That's the joke, the whole thing. It isn't. Most of the jokes are really at Arnold's expense, and his innocence and his lack of understanding of the world, and the two of them just balance each other so well. Arnold and DeVito, the two of them, are just spectacular in this movie. They really elevate it from just something that could have been just kind of an okay 80s comedy into something fantastic, great 80s classic, because of their performances and the chemistry the two of them have. Just amazing together. And one that I also love, Kindergarten Cop. This is one of Arnold's favorites. He said many times it's one of his favorites, and I think this is a great balance between some of the more hilarious, goofy Arnold comedy and some of the more interesting drama moments, or some good dramatic moments, and it's a good enough storyline to where it pulls it up from being more than just a goofy comedy about Arnold in a kindergarten classroom. There's a little bit more meat on the bones there, and some good action towards the end of the movie, so one that I've always really enjoyed. And then we have the Arnold Schwarzenegger Comedy Favorites Collection, which includes Kindergarten Cop, and then both of the Arnold and Danny DeVito movies, Twins, and the lesser Junior. Junior is funny, but it's not as smart as Twins. Their performances are good because they are good together and they have good chemistry, but even their individual performances aren't quite as on game as Twins. It's a funny movie, but it's just not quite the same as Twins, but definitely one that is worth checking out. Then we have The Running Man, and End of Days. End of Days, out of all the Arnold movies that I own, might be my least favorite, but I love the concept. The concept, it should have been amazing. Just when you look at the movie and you think of like Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger versus the devil was something along the lines of that in the previews when that movie was first coming out. And it just seemed awesome, and it's just it's okay. It's not that great of a movie, but there are some great scenes in here if you just want to see some bizarre action with Arnold. It's an okay movie overall. We have Conan the Complete Quest with Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer. The Predator 3 movie collection, so the first one there with Arnold. My favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movie of all time. I did a collection video just for this movie in particular because it is my favorite Arnold movie by far. Total Recall. Easily my favorite Arnold movie, one of my favorite movies in general. Then we have this Arnold 6-film collection, which has some of his older stuff and some of his more recent movies. We have Maggie and The Last Stand, which are more recent. The Last Stand is decent. Definitely one you should check out. I think that's one that should be given a little more attention. You have Total Recall, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, another copy of Hercules in New York, hilarious movie, and Red Heat, which Red Heat is a movie that I find to be hilarious, and I think it really relishes in the absurdity of Arnold's character, but I think it's one of those that has very mixed reception for good reason. It's you love it or you hate it. It's a very by-the-numbers, mismatched buddy cop movie, but at the same time, I love those from the 80s, so it really works for me. And then we have Terminator in this bizarre MGM trilogy pack. I don't know, Terminator and Roadhouse don't really go together for me, but Terminator. I have the special edition of Terminator. I love the cover on this one. Terminator 2 Extreme DVD. And a tin case Terminator 2. It's that Extreme DVD version as well. The Ultimate Edition DVD, just a slightly different release. And then Terminator 3. And last we have the Expendables movies, where Arnold is a character, mostly just a cameo in that, and a little bit more in these. On UMD, we have the Terminator. On HD DVD, this is a fantastic recent pickup. We have the European edition of Total Recall. I really enjoyed this copy of the movie. Fantastic. Very happy to have that one. Then on Blu-ray, we have the Blu-ray version of that same Arnold 6 movie pack that I have on DVD. It's the Blu-ray copy. Commando. Jingle All the Way. I told you I like this movie, even though it's far from one of his best. It's honestly like somewhere in the middle, maybe towards the bottom, but it's one of those movies that's become like a holiday kind of tradition for me, and it's very enjoyable. Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer. And then we have the Arnold Schwarzenegger 3D Blu-ray for Predator. On VHS, we have Commando, which has always been one of my favorites, Total Recall, and the Terminator collection. Moving on to Capacitance Electronic Disc, CED, we have Conan the Barbarian, which comes on 2 discs because of the running time. And Conan the Destroyer. Found these both together at a thrift store at the same time. And Pumping Iron, which, as I said before, is one of the essential Arnold movies to have if you haven't seen it. And I saved my favorite format for last. We have on LaserDisc the widescreen edition of True Lies. Take that out of its sleeve as a gatefold. Then we have 2 of the Image Entertainment widescreen releases of Terminator. Terminator 2. That's another one I'll take out of the sleeve here. Commando. This particular widescreen release of Commando has great picture quality. Amanda and I were watching this a few weeks ago on the projector, and even blown up to 90 inches on the projector, it looked fantastic. And occasionally LaserDisc don't look so good blown up to those proportions. This looks fantastic. It's one of the better discs, far from my best, but definitely one of the better ones picture quality wise. Kindergarten Cop. Junior. Happened to just randomly run into this when I was buying a bunch of LaserDiscs with my sister. I'll put that video at the end as well. Check that out. That was a surprise, fantastic LaserDisc haul kind of out of nowhere. Got some great movies. And then Raw Deal. The most recent pickup that completed my Arnold collection. We have Predator, widescreen on LaserDisc. Conan the Barbarian. Love the cover art on this version. This is definitely just looks fantastic. This is a great example of one of the reasons why I love LaserDisc. Even if I have movies on other formats, sometimes I'll just grab the LaserDisc if it has amazing cover art, and I love being able to watch them in that format anyway. And then the very last thing in my Arnold Schwarzenegger collection is my widescreen edition on LaserDisc, of course. Total Recall, my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movie by far. This is still my favorite copy to watch. My second favorite is definitely that HD DVD. It looks fantastic. I prefer it over the Blu-ray copy, but my favorite's always going to be the LaserDisc if it has a decent release on the format. So that is my Arnold Schwarzenegger collection. Arnold has always been one of my favorite actors. A lot of my larger actor collections tend to be more older, more classic actors, be like Cary Grant, Peter Sellers, Myrna Loy, William Powell, Marilyn Monroe, and there are a few of these great action stars though that sneak in there. Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger are the two that really are very different end of the spectrum of a lot of those other actors that I collect for. They just, for me, their careers have been so incredibly enjoyable. Arnold I just find to be a fascinating person in general, someone who in one lifetime, I mean, the guy's still kicking, still going strong, and he has become one of the greatest ever in a sport, an absolute legend just in itself. And that alone, what percentage of people that have ever lived can say they're one of the greatest ever in a professional sport? Then he became one of the most popular action stars in movie history. Another career high, people can even say that. That's already two things in a row. And then on top of that, he's had a political career. He's still going. I mean, just all the things that he's accomplished in his life. I mean, he hasn't always made the best decisions with certain things. He's not a perfect person, because no one is. But he is just such a remarkable and fascinating figure who's had such a varied and incredible and very successful career on multiple spectrums. I mean, he's just a fascinating person to explore his life and his legacy and his career, and he's been in some incredibly entertaining movies. That's really the number one thing that I want from a movie when I sit down and watch, is to have a good time. Sometimes you want to watch something that has a little more heart to it, or something that has a little bit more of a meaningful message, a little more substance to it. But I'm not always in the mood for, Schindler's List, you know what I mean? Sometimes you just want some great action, but you want it to be quality, things to be well done. You don't want just schlock. Sometimes you just want a really solid movie with a very charismatic and likable main actor, and that's what Arnold is. He is, Mr. Charisma, and it's just fantastic, a great sense of humor, and he is just a force to reckon with in action movies. Just fantastic, one of the greatest. And I love so much of the body of his work, especially during the 80s and through the middle of the 90s. That's prime Arnold for me, and he's an actor who I will watch some of those movies for as long as I live, revisit them over and over again, because they are just continuously fun. They keep just giving and giving the entertainment factor, and some of those better ones also can be a little more thought-provoking on top of that and be a little more than just entertainment, and I really like that. So he is a fantastic actor, has been in so many great movies, and is just a fascinating figure, and that's why he is one of my largest actor collections, and I'm very happy to be complete, to have every copy of everything that I personally want for my collection. Just very happy to be able to sit back and enjoy Arnold Schwarzenegger.